figured out quite quickly of what I needed to do, and that was I was forced into prostitution. Um, I stayed there until I was almost 15. I had been arrested at one point, and my dad would not come get me. And so the person that I was with called my dad and said, "If you come get her, I'll pay you." Because the days that I spent there was days that he wasn't making any money from me, and so I went, and my dad came and got me, dropped me back off to that person's house, and left. By the 1990s, he was arrested by the FBI and incarcerated, so he was no longer there, but I felt like he had abandoned me, like he left me. And so the addiction really took off and started just putting a lot of my pain and a lot of the stuff that I was dealing with emotionally, I just buried it in the drugs and got high every day.
I'm Amy the Seventh with a message. In its all relevant knowledge, intelligence, beauty, elegance, wisdom in a prism. Free your brain from the prison. Be kind, be significant. Time to listen in. Be kind, be significant. Live magnificent. It's time to listen in. Be kind, be significant. Time to listen in. What's up, everyone? It's your lady Amy the Seventh with another episode of Pretty Woman Speaks. I have Deb Monroe of Detroit here. She's a certified peer support specialist in Michigan, a certified recovery coach and community health worker. She's also the founder and CEO of a peer-owned and operated nonprofit called Hope365 and Recovery Concepts. So I want everyone to welcome Deb. Hey, Deb, welcome to Amy the Seventh.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Well, it was really great to have you. I had an opportunity to actually have a face-to-face with her after one of my guests recommended me, Coach Spratt. He recommended I have a conversation with Deb. I really wanted to talk to you about Up From Ashes. How did the book title come to you? Because it's so powerful.
I think I always look towards that fiery phoenix story, the myth of the fiery phoenix of an individual, person or persons going through, insurmountable odds, going through what we refer to as the fire. And which we know the fire will either consume you or purify you. And they came out the other end purified, representing this beautiful, majestic bird of fire raising up above the ashes. So,
and I'm really excited because I think that there are so many people who need assistance when it comes to recovery and community supports. So, Deb, I really want to know, how did you get into becoming a certified peer support specialist?
Well, it was nothing that I ever heard of before. I didn't even know that it existed until I needed some supports myself. And I had signed up for and started receiving mental health services because after years of trauma and addiction, I realized that I needed more help than just being clean. So I had to reach out and get professional help. And through that process, someone had asked me about being a peer, and I was like, well, what is that? Like, what do they do? And they said, they do exactly what you're doing right now. You use your lived experience to be able to help other people, or even just to give them hope. And so I said okay, and I went for my first interview as a peer and actually did not get hired. And it already went towards the belief that I had about myself that that I probably wouldn't get this job, and it was I didn't know how it was going to change my life at that point. And then I applied for another one, and it was at the same agency where I had applied the first time, but it was a different company. And so I went in there, and all the things that you try to hide on a resume, all the things that you don't want to talk about, like I'm a convicted felon, and or I don't have a lot of job history, or this or that, all those things that we don't want to talk about or we tried to hide were the things that helped me get the job that I got. And I will tell you, from that day forward, it really impacted and changed the quality of my life because, if I hadn't been up here, I don't think I would be where I'm at today.
That's really deep for you to say that your background is the reason why you're set up in the way that you are now. And I tell people all the time that your trauma, the lessons that you're learning, you never know what that experience can lead you to down the road because you know unfortunately sometimes our pain can become someone else savior, like we could save someone through our own pain. And so Deb, I really want to talk to you about how do you go about saving someone when you're still healing yourself.
Well, I don't think it's really about saving someone. I think it's
Okay.
about walking alongside them and supporting them.
Okay.
A lot of times I hear people say is, "Oh, I did it, you can do it too." Well, if the person could do it, they would have already done it. And so what they need is it's not they don't want you to be there to say, "Hey, you can do it, just come on over." They want to say is, there was a time in my life where I stood right where you're at, and I didn't know what to do either. And I don't know if what I did is going to help you, but it's giving you another option. So it's just supporting the person, and being there and helping them explore what options they have and how to minimize or remove some of the barriers that get in the way of them moving forward.
So it sounds like essentially we need to change the language because you even corrected me when I said saving someone. So essentially, it seems like there needs to be a language change around when it goes around helping or supporting someone through their trauma or through their recovery status. Would you think so?
Yeah. You know, I used to think that when I first came into services that because they were the professionals, they had the plaques on the walls that that gave them their credentials. And I used to think that if they're the professionals that they're going to fix me. And they couldn't. It was work that I had to put in for myself. I had to do the work, and it was hard. There were times that I wanted to give up, but I had people that supported me and didn't give up on me when I wanted to give up on myself. And so I think that was really important. But it was I had to do it. No one could do it for me.
And you said that it was a lot of work. What work goes into healing and recovery and getting to a place where you feel like you can support yourself fully?
Some of the work that I had to put in is I had to recognize. I think my therapist said the hardest part for her working with me was getting me to realize that I was a victim as opposed to like what was happening to me. And I told her, I'm not a victim because once I understand what's happened to me, I can do something about it. And so she was just said it was the hardest part was just getting me to realize some of the stuff that I held on to and the guilt and the shame that I had was not necessarily that I had to take ownership of it. And it
And
just goes back to my background.
why do you think it was hard for you to accept that you were a victim?
Because most of what I did while I was out there was more about my choice, I felt. But then again, is that just because I do something doesn't mean that that I consent, that I may just be compliant.
And so, Deb, I know that we haven't really went into your background and really what happened, but I really want to take the time out to see if you're comfortable to share with us with your past and what has happened to you.
Sure. So growing up, I struggled with a lot of abandonment issues. My mom had a lot of trauma of her own growing up, and her coping mechanism, I guess, would be to escape and would just disappear for long periods of time and not come home. And me and my brothers ended up a lot of times in the foster care system. And I remember, early on, I just wanted someone to care about me. So I dealt with those abandonment issues with my parents. And I met someone. I decided that I was going to run away with the fair, and I remember going to the fair, and I met someone my first day there. And he was really nice to me. He treated me well. He gave me something to eat. He listened to me. I don't know exactly what he said to me that day. But the next thing I know, I'm leaving the fair with him, and I was, and next thing I know, it was my first drink that I had ever had, and I ended up in Detroit, not necessarily knowing what I needed to do, or what was going to be expected of me. Sorry, but I figured out quite quickly of what I needed to do, and that was I was forced into prostitution. I stayed there until I was almost 15. I had been arrested at one point, and my dad would not come get me. And so the person that I was with called my dad and said, "If you come get her, I'll pay you." Because the days that I spent there was days that he wasn't making any money from me, and so I went, and my dad came and got me, dropped me back off to that person's house, and left. And so it just kind of validated everything this person had said to me prior to, is that no one cared about me but him. And so, like, there became this dependence on him, because this is the person that's taking care of me. This is the person that cares about me, and no matter what, they're not leaving me. And so, you know, I didn't necessarily think at the time that what I was doing, I was just doing it to have someone to care about me. And, so I stayed there. I finally went home when I turned 15, and I went to DHS and I told them I needed help, that I was homeless, and they told me that I was an emancipated minor because my dad had emancipated me. He did not want to be involved, and said that I could take care of myself, and so I was put into the juvenile system until I could get into a foster care home. And I remember being in that foster care home, and I asked the lady, I said, "Do you care about me? Do you love me?" And she said, "No." She goes, "You're not my child." And I said, "Okay." And I walked basically out the back door and went back to Detroit and back to the person that I was with, because at least I felt like he cared about me. Um, and so I stayed with him until I started getting involved with drugs. I started getting involved with drugs around 18 or 19 years old, because I went and started working in the bars, and so started dancing and got introduced to like the cocaine and stuff like that. From snorting cocaine to smoking it, my life changed dramatically because the drug became more important than him. And so and part of what he did was is that you could not get high and be with him. And so, if you got caught, there a lot of times you were physically assaulted and stuff like that. And so, like I said, the drugs became more important. And by the 1990s, he was arrested. By the FBI and incarcerated. So he was no longer there, but I felt like he had abandoned me, like he left me. And so the addiction really took off, and started just putting a lot of my pain and a lot of the stuff that I was dealing with emotionally, I just buried it in the drugs and got high every day. I didn't look at going to jail and things like that as a negative. I looked at them as a benefit, because if I go to jail for a couple of days, at least I get some sleep, I get some food, that will make, and it'll be easier for me to go back out and continue what I'm doing. And so I kind of protected my, like what I was doing. And that's all I lived for, was to get high. And a lot of it was to mask the emotional pain that I was feeling. I did that almost 13 years, lost three of my kids to the state of Michigan because of it. So I felt like, and I had got a lot of messages too from the court systems and from DHS, is that I was never going to amount to anything, that I was, a menace to society, that I was never going to be productive. And so I started to really believe what people said about me. And so why would I want to work towards something that I'll never get anyway? So I lowered this expectation and I stayed right here for a really long time. I had many attempts of trying to get, stop using drugs. I was told to go into meetings, do 90 meetings, 90 days. And a lot of times I would go to those meetings and then I'd find someone and leave those meetings, relapse, and then return to use. And so I just felt like, when is it going to end? Because this is where this is my life and I'm going to die out here. I finally, like I was just I had a lot of risk taking behavior, just putting myself in situations that could potentially really harm me, but didn't care about the consequences that I was experiencing. I was homeless. Like I said, all the money that I made went towards drugs. And so finally, my addiction got me to a point where I had got busted with possession of cocaine. And I got probation, but I violated that probation by getting arrested for having more cocaine. And finally, they wanted to reinstate the charge and asked me if I wanted to, they were going to give me 1 year in the county jail. But in my addictive mind, I was like, but if I go to prison for 1 year and 1 day, I can get out in 30 days. I can continue to kill myself. And so basically that's what I asked for in front of the judge. I said, "Can I go to prison? I would like 1 year and a day, please." And he looked at me and he goes, "Well, I'll tell you what, I'll do better than that." And he gave me 1.5 to 4 years. And I will tell you, even though I think about like that was the stupidest thing I ever did, it was actually one of the I think it was a strength because it saved my life. When I got there, I was not thinking about recovery. And I went into a room one day and they had a meeting where they had women come in from the age of 13 all the way to 70. And they talked about how they were going to be in prison for the rest of their lives. And I sat there and I thought to myself, like, man, that could be me on any given day. I don't want to live in prison for the rest of my life. And I thought about what I was doing to my kids, and I'm like, I'm doing exactly what my mother did to me, by abandoning them. And how do I feel about what she did? Just imagine what they feel about me. And so when I finally got out of prison, I was able to stop using drugs, but still had a lot of the same thoughts and behavior. I think I was more addicted to the lifestyle than the substance. And so it was really hard to break that cycle. I was able to be productive on parole for about 1.5 years, and then because of my lifestyle, ended up back in prison and had to max out. And I used to think that I would never go to prison as long as I don't use drugs. And here I am sitting back in prison and I didn't use drugs, so I couldn't blame it on the drugs anymore. I had to think about what was going on inside of me. Like, what do I need to work on? Because I'm not sure what's going on. And so when I got out that time, I started working towards getting my kids back, and I was able to get them. I was able to get 2 out of my 3 children back. One had already been adopted out, and so I got them into therapy, thinking that they would need help, and then I realized that I probably need help too. And so I go in and I sign up with a therapist, and I'm bringing up all of this old trauma. And every time I went in there, it was like opening up this wound. Like I would sit there and talk about my past and stuff like that. And when I left, I would feel worse than when I came in because now I brought up all these feelings and all these things, and I don't know how to deal or cope with them. And my coping mechanism in the past was to use drugs. So they sent me to someone that could actually give me more therapy, more support, and I got involved in a DBT program, which was dialectical behavior therapy that really helped me identify my emotions and feelings because a lot of my feelings were anger. Because if I felt anger, I felt like I had some control, or I felt like people would listen to me, and it was really the opposite. I had no control, and people were shying away from me because, they didn't want to feel attacked, or or I felt aggressive, or my tone was deep, or whatever. And so I realized that that wasn't helpful. What am I really feeling underneath that? And a lot of times it was I felt hurt. I felt misunderstood. People wouldn't listen to me. And so I had to start working on those things. And I think that DBT really helped me with identifying and working on the emotions as they arose. Um, you know, I used to say that everything I did for nothing, but to be a peer and be able to share with my experience with, my mental health and my addiction, to say that if I can help someone else, it was for something, because I wasted so many years doing stuff that was non-productive. Today, I can at least say I'm being productive. And it just helps me in my own recovery when I'm able to help other people. So, like our home in Rochester, the Hope 365, I used to think that, I used to work at a organization that did crisis services, and I used to ask individuals like, when did you start experiencing symptoms? And they would say, oh, 3 or 4 weeks ago. Well, why are you just now coming in for help? Because I wasn't sick enough yet. And I got that. It's the only time you're going to get houses you had to fit a certain box. And so I opened up this home for individuals that are struggling with their emotional wellness and need support, and don't have to wait in long lines and doesn't have to meet a criteria. They can just call and say, hey, I need help. And then they're surrounded with peer support specialists and recovery coaches to be able to provide that support and stand alongside of them, and non-judgmental, and and just be able to pour into them, because a lot of times when they come in, their cup is empty. So just being able to pour into them just helps me in my own recovery. So it's like twofold, being able to help others and then help myself.
Wow, to have such a long, arduous, like trepidatious journey that you've been on, and then able to sit before me now, and I look at you, Deb, and I cannot tell that you've been through so many different trials and tribulations, starting off at such a young age. So I really want to commend you for, making that time, that hard turn, that hard pivot in your life, because not everybody gets to a point where they have the strength to pivot when their life has shown them that this is all that they can be at this point. So I really do want to commend you for that. But Deb, I heard so much in that, and I have so many questions. I guess the first question I want to start with now is, I want to celebrate how long have you been clean and free of many of the things that had a hold on you in your past.
So in 2002, was the when I was free from incarceration. I hadn't used since 2000. Um, but I think that my recovery started, and a lot of times people don't understand it, but my recovery started when I started getting support services and was able to start working on the emotional self, because like I said, is I wasn't using drugs, but I still had a lot of the same behaviors and thoughts, and so, like, to be able to feel some freedom from my mind and from some of those experiences that I've been through. It was like being able to. So 2009 is actually when I reached out and got help, and my life changed dramatically because of it.
So a period of, what, 7 or 9 years, so between 2000 2002, so between 7 and 9 years is where you finally got to a point where you felt some type of relief and freedom and a peace of mind.
Hmm.
That's a long time to be free of a drug, but yet still in prison. It seems to me, from other things that you know that keeps your mind up and busy and not settled. I mean, that gives me an eye opener for other people that I may see in those similar positions, that a lot of it has to do is that they don't have a peace of mind.
Hmm.
Not so much that, as you said, that it wasn't so much the joy of the drug, that you were after. You were more so after, you know, the relief that you got from it.
Yeah. You know, trauma is real, and a lot of times people think that if I'm no longer experiencing that trauma that I've experienced, and a lot of times it starts in childhood. And if I'm no longer in a situation or in an environment that creates that trauma, then I'm okay. But trauma has a way of coming back and reappearing at any time in your life. You know, it took me, I work with people now that are in their 20s, and I say, I hope that you will never have to, do this for as long as I had to do it. I mean, I was almost in my 50s when I was able to start really living, you know. I had to learn. One of the things that I think about now is that when I got my kids back, I didn't know how to be a mother. I had no role models for mothering. I didn't know how to be a mother, and I really had a hard time even showing emotion to my kids because I had learned how to numb myself for so long. Because they say that when you show emotion, it's people can take advantage of that, and so I learned to survive out in my life, and so those were things that I had to also work on, like that's what takes. I think that's the work that you have to do, and you have to learn how to break down some of those walls or some of those barriers, and be able to accept help from people, that not everybody is out to use you or take advantage of you. Let people know what you're feeling, because sometimes, a lot of times people wear masks, and I can look okay on the outside, but on the inside be just falling apart. And so I have to let other people in and let them know, hey, this is how I'm feeling today. This is what I might need from you. I can't just expect someone to give me something that they don't even know that I need. So these are the things that I've had to learn over time. I've had to learn to set boundaries and know what healthy relationships were. I had to learn how to, I even had to learn basic skills. Like, when I came out of prison at 38, 40, something like that, I didn't even know how to cook. I had never paid bills before. I've always been dependent on someone else to do those things for me. I needed someone to come in and teach me how to do those things. So I always tell people is that, my like staff and stuff, is that when you're working with, don't assume that they already have the skills and the tools that they're going to need to be successful. They may need to be taught those because maybe no one has ever taught them those things before. Because I know that was really important step in my process too, was being able to learn things that I should have already known, but I didn't.
So I know that you mentioned that you were 38 when you got out of prison the second and last time, and then you that was also when you got a chance to get your children back, correct? Around how old were your kids when you finally were able to get the 2 out of 3 back?
Well, I was able to get one of my children while I was on parole,
Okay.
and that gave me some hope. And then I was afraid that I would lose her when I went back. But the guardian ad litem was actually very supportive of keeping family unity. And so I was able to get her back in my life as soon as I came out, and had stable housing. And then I worked on my son and was able to get him. I think she was about 7 or 8, and he was 5 when I finally took back my parenting rights for him. He was really angry with me. He went through some of the same things I went through with the abandonment. And he felt like, I guess the person that he was with told him I didn't care about him. I was able to connect with my daughter that I've never met, because she was taken at birth. And she said that, I said, did you ever think about me? And she said, no, they told me because of the lifestyle you were living that you were dead. So I kind of, that's what that's what I grew up believing, that you were dead. And, so we're building a relationship. She's almost 32 now. My other daughter is in her 30s, and then my son is 26. And then I was able to have another child in my recovery. in 2006, and this is his year of graduation. I've gotten to be a parent to to a child, and I will tell you the relationship with him has been different than with my other kids, because me and my other kids were already there. We had to learn how to get to know each other, where I got to have that maternal bond with my last child. And so the relationship with, and he's the one that actually taught me how to be able to say that I love you, and be able to give a hug and not feel like it is a part of a transaction. You know what I'm saying? Because that's the only time that there was ever physical contact, was if there was a transaction. And so to be able to do that, and and just know that it's genuine and it's real. So,
That's I was just gonna ask you, with you having that last baby and you were able to carry this baby all the way through, and right now almost into adulthood, I wanted to ask, but you've hinted on the healing that you've gotten from seeing that your child all the way through. Uh, you know, it's a mother's love, and I'm glad that you got an opportunity to actually experience what a mother's love is. And I wanted to know, because you talked about all the things that you've been through. Do you really feel like you were able, as a child, as a teenager, do you feel like there was enough support there for you to keep you from the track that you were on, like from support from organizations, support from the state? I know that you said that your dad just kind of dropped you off back into the lifestyle, but do you feel like there is a lot of support out there for wayward children?
no. A lot of times we just look at the behaviors, and not the person or the child. A lot of times people will say, I went back and I got all my transcripts from DHS when I was a child, because I have my perspective or my memories of what it was like, but I wanted to see what was documented. And so I went back to Jackson, and I pulled all of the DHS documents. And reading through those, like, I didn't know that all of my dad had a big family. He had 13, I think 11 brothers and sisters, and none of them were willing to take us because they thought we were troubled kids, like we were, you know delinquents and things like that. DHS at one point said I was a neglected child, but when I was took and brought to Detroit for the purpose of prostitution, then I was considered a delinquent. But again,
Back to that language.
yeah. Yeah, and it changes the type of services you receive. So instead of going to foster care, you go to the juvenile home. And so it's, again, it's not about what's wrong with the person, but what has happened to them. And I think that if we look at what kind of, I think there's not enough supports that for people or families. If you have my father was a chronic alcoholic. He and my mother, like I said, had experienced a lot of trauma and sexual abuse as a child. And so again, is that, and there's a stigma about mental health. Nobody wants to say that they need help for their emotional wellness. But I think it's just as important as your physical health. Because if you're not doing well emotionally, it is going to affect every other area in your life, whether it be your social supports, your physical health, your spiritual, like your financial. Because if I'm not doing well emotionally, I may not show up to work, right? I may not go out and hang out, and I'm going to stay at home and I'm going to isolate. So we have to find a balance in our lives and be able to put stuff in all of those areas, so that just, and that's one thing that I see, especially so I used to do interviews for the peer training, and a lot of times, especially in Black and brown communities, I'd say, so tell me about your mental health. Oh, no, I don't have a mental health problem. I just have addiction problem. Well, why did you start using drugs in the first place? And I was like, I'm going to tell you there, it's okay to talk about our mental health, because I will tell you, you will feel no other the freedom from your mind is way better than just the drugs.
Ooh, freedom from the mind. I feel like even though I haven't had an addiction or anything like that, freedom from your mind is a struggle that's like across the board, like having freedom from your mind, the ability to quiet your mind, the
Hmm.
ability, to control and have positive thoughts. I feel like, that is like a human flaw, like essentially, because like even I struggle with having positive thoughts, maintaining the freedom of the mind where, I'm not blaming myself for things like my accident. Like I felt like for a period of time I went through the period of blaming myself for
Hmm.
the accident, and it, obviously there was something I was doing so wrong that God wanted to sit me down and force me into a wheelchair for a year. I just felt like it was me. It really took me to do some of that shadow work that you mentioned, where you actually accept that this happened to me, but it didn't happen because it was my fault.
Right.
It happened because it gave me now the ability to speak for other people who went through that trauma to help them. And I know it's not the best feeling in the world to know that, hey, my I had to go through trauma to get this far, but I felt now some joy that's come into my life because I've heard people say, "Hey, listening to you, I can now, take a step forward." And I sometimes, I say to this day, I don't know why I had to get both of my ankles broken
Right.
for this to happen. Why it had to be so dramatic, so traumatic, all of those things for me to be a beacon of light for other people. But I can now sit here and say it's worth it.
Hmm.
I know it's such a weird thing to say, but it is.
For years, I used to think that there was this void, and I didn't know what it was. And I used to try to fill people or material things in there, and it just didn't fill up. It wasn't until I started doing what that I'm doing is that it gave me meaning and purpose. And that's that spiritual part of your life. Like, when you find your meaning and purpose, because that's our goal in life is to find our meaning and purpose. So, yeah.
And then what I love about your journey is that even though it took you almost 40 years into your whole ordeal for you to discover your meaning and purpose, it lets you know that there is no timeline there
Mm-mm.
for a meaning and purpose to come in your life. And so, Deb, I want you to speak to people right now who are still struggling to find meaning and purpose, and they feel like they're past the expiration date of finding the meaning and purpose. Can you speak to those people about that?
I think that there, like you said, is there's no change is always happening, right? And so in the moment, you may feel like nothing's ever going to change, and that things may not ever get better. But I will tell you, every day things are changing. And somebody said something to me one time. They said I could either stay bitter or get better. And I've kind of held that with me for a really long time. Do I want to stay bitter or get better? Because it was easy to blame my mother, the system. If my mother hadn't left, this wouldn't have happened. If this wouldn't, they wouldn't have took my kids, this wouldn't have happened. And it was easy to blame other people. And today have to say is I have to move on from that. I have to take personal responsibility for myself. I can't change the past, right? But I can get back in the driver's seat and move towards the future. And so when you think about meaning and purpose, is find out what you're passionate about. You know, I always say give, if you ever volunteered or if you've done something for somebody, how did it make you feel? You usually feel really good about it. And so find things that can help other people. All of us have a story. No matter what that story is, we all have a story that someone is going to be able to relate to. Now, I know that I probably am not going to relate to every single person that listens to your iPod podcast, but I know that there may be one person that is going to be able to relate to what we've talked about today and have some hope.
Ooh, having hope and really finding, what moves you spiritually. Yeah, I know that before we started recording, I asked you about the holidays and are you ready to go? And you, what was so profound for you? You said holidays for you is about family, it's about community, and that's not the answer that you get so often when it comes to people celebrating holidays. They talk about their presents or their trips, but really when you get to the meat of the matter, the holidays is about loving on those who love on you. And I really can't express that enough, to how much mental relief and peace and calmness that comes from really attaching yourself to those who have your best interests.
Yeah. I think it too is it's about finding support. People, a lot of times we feel like we're alone. We can't ask for help because that's a sign of weakness, but it's actually a strength. And, when I first started out, when I started making changes in my life, I didn't feel like I had a lot of support. Most of the people that were in my life got paid to be there. But it was the type of support that I needed at that moment. And then building friendships and relationships that were mutual, give and take, was something new for me. And today I don't have a big circle of people that I hang out with, but I know I have people that I can call and I can count on, and I can also count on me. So
Tribe. My grandmother and I, we were just talking about having a tribe. The importance of having a tribe is so big. And one thing that really stood out to me about what my grandma, she says a lot of things, but she said if people spent 100% of their time around people who love them 100% of the time, they will always have love. And how she would put it is that if 25% of people love you 100% of the time, why don't you spend all of your time with those 25% of people? And uh, to me, that's made a difference in how I move in life, because it's like, well, I know who loves me, I know who have my best interests, so I'm gonna make sure that I stay with them all the time, even when I go and visit my relatives, like my elders. I know that I spend my time with them, outside of not being with the people around my age. There's nothing, no issues there with people around my age. It's just that I know my elders, they're the ones that are going to truly love me. And
right.
so that's where I prefer to spend my time with. Deb, this conversation has been so fruitful. Before we do go and wrap up, is there anything that you would like to add? If people are seeking some of your services, where could they go? Let us know that.
Yeah. So like we are here in Oakland County. Right now, our funding says that we can only accept like Oakland County residents, but we're looking to change that because I think this service is needed everywhere. And we get a lot of individuals from all over the state. We're even getting people calling us from out of state that are seeking a service like this because this is the first one that's ever been done in Michigan. There's not a lot of them around, but it gives people the freedom of choice. Not an institutional setting. They can still go to work. They can still go out and be with their family. They can still do what they need to do, but they know that they can come and be there and have support. So we're available at any time. Hope365, you can look us up. Um, but again, is just that, I just say that anybody has the ability for a quality of life. I say as sometimes I say as a peer, I'm the evidence that recovery is possible. You know, and know how long, no matter how long it takes, as long as you are moving forward, you're not going backwards.
Important thought. important thought that any little progress is movement forward.
Celebrate it. Yes. You know, like I always say is that if there was a time that I didn't even want to get out of my bed because I felt so depressed, if I can get up and just open up the curtains today and let sunshine in, that was progress. It's a
That
step
is.
moving forward.
Ooh. I think if more people knew that minimum progress is still a step forward, if that there were applause just for what you said, you got out the bed and you let some sunlight in, if someone could stand there and applaud you, I think that people would move out of their mental depression or trauma a lot quicker. But like you said, most people go through it alone and they're by themselves. And having a cheerleader, having someone who knows what you've been through, or even not know what you've been through, but they're supporting you to coming out of it, is a make or break moment for a lot of people. And I want to express out there that if you are a person who does not have a proper support system, there are people like Deb Monroe who are here at Hope 65, who are in, even though she's working on expanding outside of Oakland County, she may have people because she works across the state. She's worked with people across the state. She may know someone outside of her parameters to help you get the type of help that you need. Deb, is there any other thing that you would like to add before we go?
Yeah, there's over 4,000 peer supports in the state of Michigan. Some of them are returning citizens. Some of them are have struggled with addiction. Some of them have struggled with mental health. Some of them have co-occurring disorders. 4,000 in the state of Michigan at least. So there is help. You just got to ask for it.
Ooh, asking. And I think it's very important that she named those 4,000 people actually have experience in what you may be going through, because it's one thing to go to someone and tell them, hey, I need help. It's another to go to someone who's been down that road, has come out of that fire, and then can also assist you with the same thing. I think that is the biggest point of it all. So make sure that when you are seeking help, find someone who's been through something similar of you. That'll help you get out of that journey better. Don't you think, Deb?
Yes. Yep. You don't have to do it alone.
That's a big deal. Well, Deb, I really appreciate you for expressing and being vulnerable in your telling your journey, because sharing things like this, I hope will help others come forward and essentially ask for help, like you said. Again, this is another episode of Amy the Seventh. And I had Deb Monroe here, who is a peer support specialist. She's also the founder of Hope365, which is a recovery nonprofit. Again, thank you so much for supporting. I'm here with another episode that airs each and every Monday at Tay Harbor Studios. You can find that any information about me on my Facebook or on my Instagram at Amy the Seventh. Again, this is another episode of Pretty Woman Speaks. Y'all have a good day.
All right. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
With a message.